We'll get to adultery next week. Let's deal with this matter of murder and what it says, even as far as the text is concerned, in our modern day, because this again is an issue for Christians. And how do we answer the question? So, if you have gotten to the point where someone will say to you, it's a problem that you Christians would support the death penalty for murder and for those kinds of things, but yet at the same time you want to proclaim that you are pro-life when it comes to the matter of the unborn and abortion, as far as that's concerned. How is that? They would see it as that's completely contradictory. Well, we want to work through this in our own minds. And again, they would point to something like this. And doesn't Jesus say that you shouldn't murder? And, they'll use passages like this and all the rest. And so they'll also tell you the statistics. They will tell you that the death penalty is not a deterrent. And so that just because you have a death penalty doesn't mean that people won't go out and do it anyway. So why would we have something like that if it doesn't deter them from doing it in the first place? Well, all of that kind of misses the point, and I do want to make sure that I understand this, or make it understood, that when it comes to the idea of the death penalty, it's not really something that we as a society are under the law of God as far as what the Bible has to say. But the church is. And so what does the Bible have to say about this? And what does it say about God's nature? Let's remember that when it came to putting to death someone for their actions under the law, we're talking about the people who were governed by the law, the children of Israel. So is the church governed by the law to the Israelites? The Ten Commandments and all the things that we find there in the Old Testament. Some of it, sure. Some of the moral laws are still in place, but the church doesn't have the ability to do those kind of things anyway. So it's not really even addressed as far as the church is concerned. In our country, if you live in the United States as I do, we are under the laws and the jurisdiction of the government that is here. So if the government will allow for the death penalty, if there's capital punishment in the country, which there is, and some states vary a little bit differently on this. California, where we used to live, was quite a bit different, and different states will handle it a bit differently because it is a 10th Amendment thing. But the idea, if it's a federal deal, there is, of course, the death penalty, and that will happen on the federal level. But again, to get away from all of the governmental stuff, if the accusation against us is, well, you're pro-life when it comes to abortion, but you're pro-death penalty when it comes to murderers, how can you reconcile those two things? Well, we can say that God was absolutely pro-life, and he hated, it was one of the things that we're told that he hates, the people who are quick to rush to shed, they're quick to shed innocent blood. So there were times when God would say it's okay for a person to kill in the sense of, like I said, warfare and those other reasons. But the Bible would also say that if a person murders, then they are then also to have their life taken. It's life for life kind of a thing. So it never even deals with it's a deterrent. That's not the issue. It's what's just, it's what's right, and it's what's equitable. If a person has taken a life, then they should have to pay for it with their own. So that's what the children of Israel lived under. And I would say, as a believer here in the 21st century, I don't have a problem with it if a person has taken another person's life, that theirs is taken as well, because that's in God's nature. It's not for me to take it into my own hands. It's not for me to do. That's a governmental kind of a thing. But ultimately, if the question about us as believers, how can we possibly support that? Well, God had a problem with the innocent being put to death, and God hated that it would take place. There's nothing more innocent than a child who has never even seen the light of day. All that it's ever known is the inside, as much as it can even grasp, a child can even grasp the inside of a womb. And so God would see that as, what worse offense could there possibly be when it comes to the idea of murder, that a child is exposed and ultimately put to death while it's still in its mother. Is there any more egregious thing that God would look at? And that would be the ultimate example of innocent blood. So does God have a problem with that? Absolutely. Does God have a problem with a murderer who is put to death? No, he called for that among the children of Israel. Now, we are not the children of Israel. We are not the ones who carry that out, but the law of our land is one of capital punishment. And what we do know is that God has no problem with capital punishment if they are people governed by his law. So it is in his nature. That's not a problem. It's not an issue. We can agree with that in the sense, and again, if people have a personal problem with it, that's fine. You can have your personal problem with it, whatever. But if we're going to answer the question, how can you somehow make the exclusion of abortion, but the inclusion of a murderer being put to death? Well, I can go back and say it's in God's nature to say that the punishment would fit the crime. Doesn't matter if it's a deterrent. And if it is a deterrent, even the better. Maybe that'll keep a person from thinking about it. But that's not why God says it. He doesn't put it there as a way that maybe people would think twice about it. That's a benefit of it, but it is that the punishment fits the crime. So if a person deliberately murders another person and their life is taken as a way of what's right and just and equitable, that's what God called for among his people. So yes, that is his nature. It is what he would consider a just result for the actions of a murderer, that they would have to pay with their own lives. That's different from the idea of abortion, because the child has never done anything that is rightfully justifiable of their life being taken. They have never done anything to offend in that way. So if we're ever asked the question, the child is absolutely innocent. The murderer is not. And so how does God see the two of those people? A person who would take the life of another should pay for it with their own. That's how it was under his people as far as they were governed. The innocent would be, in this case, the child in the womb, could not be more innocent if you tried. And yet for them to have their lives taken is an unjust thing in the extreme. And so if something like that were happening, and if we had the technology and all that stuff, and that was able to happen under two people under the law, God would have the people who did it, they would have to suffer the consequences. That would be their lives taken, doctor and patient alike. That would be under the law. God would never allow it. It would be something punishable by their life being taken as well. So we need to understand how God has viewed it in times past, recognizing absolutely without question that it is something that was for them under that law, the children of Israel, but we live under the law of our particular country, which does allow for it. And it doesn't change the fact that God would say the punishment should fit the crime. And so how do we answer that question? Punishment should fit the crime. That's how God has done it in times past. It's not for us to do. We live under a government that allows for it, and God has allowed for it when it was governing of his people. So it is in his nature to say life for a life. If it is a deterrent, all the better. But ultimately it is that the punishment must fit the crime. So that's how we answer that question when it comes up, and if it does, and how often, I don't know. If you can let me know in the comments here on the YouTube channel if you've run into that argument and don't know exactly how to answer it. That would be our answer as believers. So we're going to pick up at the matter of adultery, which we pick up in verse 27 next week. And again, if you have any questions on this or anything that I've shared, or the Israel trip or any of the other things, you can contact me once again through the ministry's website, which is oldpaththeology.net. And I will get back to you as soon as I get a chance to read your email, or we can do it in the comments section here on the YouTube channel. So